GameRanks presents another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our thoughts on the latest games releasing. As usual, I'm your tour guide, Jake Baldino, and today we're talking about The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild has been in the news for the past few days for one reason. It's been getting killer reviews. Aside from just getting 10 out of 10s everywhere, it even reached the highest score from some places that only give these scores out to games like Metal Gear Solid, Mario 64, Half-Life, etc., etc. This all almost came as a bit of a surprise because leading up to the release, myself and, many others were a bit skeptical. Sure, there's the average hype and excitement that comes with a new Zelda game, but it seemed odd for Zelda to embrace those conventional modern open world game design philosophies and potentially lose some of its identity. But I'm happy to say Zelda didn't lose its identity at all, and it's absolutely worth all the praise it's been receiving. It's not perfect, and I feel like I need to say this more often than I'd like, but of course no game is perfect. But I think this is definitely a worthy addition to the Zelda franchise and probably one of the stronger ones we've seen in a while. And just as an FYI, this is a spoiler-free video. I only recorded the early hours of my gameplay because I know some of you guys are sensitive to environmental spoilers and stuff. The story sets up simple enough though. You're Link, as usual, the chosen hero who this time wakes up from this magical tomb 100 years after the fall of Hyrule to the dastardly Calamity Ganon. You're dumped into the opening area, which is already pretty damn big. You're given a little bit of guidance, but once you get the paraglider, the game essentially begins and the entire world is open to you, and it's up to you really to figure out what you need or even want to do. Breath of the Wild is absolutely freaking huge, maybe even a bit too huge at times. But when you're wandering up a lonely mountain or sprinting across a giant field, it can't help but feel kind of like a big open world Western RPG like Witcher or Skyrim. But it's the gameplay systems within and how exactly you play that make this game feel distinctly unique and thankfully still totally a Zelda game at least. I've always kind of dug seeing Japanese game developers' take on the open world gaming trends, most recently with Metal Gear Solid 5. Breath of the Wild has that basic stuff. It's got a big old map, it's got side quests, it's even got towers to climb to unlock more map, but it's how Zelda handles these very differently that makes them special. Climbing towers honestly doesn't really get you much, but they do get you a natural vantage point. You're free to take out your scope thing and scour the environment and place as many pins as you want on the map in kind of like an open-ended way. It almost feels kind of like an old-fashioned game when you're stuck with a physical map, almost like, say it with me, the original Zelda. So you could totally see what they were going for here in terms of setting your own adventure and discovering things for yourself. But I think the way they handle these towers is a good indicator of most of the other mechanics in the game. There's a light cooking, crafting element, but it's simple and surprisingly deep and tons of fun. The game also barely tells you about it and doesn't hold your hand. In fact, this is probably the least hand-holdly Zelda game we've seen in a while. That may scare some casuals, but holy shit, does it make this game really good and exciting, especially when you discover something for the first time. Like Link's Awakening or Ocarina or whatever other Zelda game is your favorite, Breath of the Wild really embraces that aha moment so well. Figuring shit out is such a reward. That's the reward and feeling of achievement you get for all your exploration. Combat is mostly your typical Zelda fare, but it's much more challenging, and I think for the better. Weapons degrade, and they degrade really quickly. It honestly can be a bit annoying, despite some workarounds that the game does give you later on. I think honestly it's one of the few questionable design choices here. It seems like it just exists just to exist. But thankfully with it comes a variety of different size weapons, and hammers, and swords, and staffs, and stuff that you'll end up using all types at least once. It kind of freshens that now classic lock-on, attack, backflip Zelda combat stuff. And in the combat, you can actually get one-shotted quite easily and often, especially early on in the game. This Zelda game is definitely not for the faint of heart, but like I said earlier, at least, exploration does reap rewards. Finding and completing these bite-sized dungeon challenges net you points to buy more hearts and more stamina. So getting these necessary upgrades takes quite a bit of exploring and climbing mountains and running across rivers. And because of that, and seeing that you need more stamina and more hearts to really progress, I foresee this game taking you a long ass time. Even still now, I'm over like 30 hours in and I still see no end in sight. That stamina system I mentioned does make traversal pretty interesting though. It may seem kind of like a pain in the ass that everything drains your stamina, like every single action, but it does make you think more about how to get to the more difficult areas. Doing some specific things, like most importantly eating certain foods, will buff something like your cold resistance or give you more stamina for the long road you're probably gonna have ahead of you. It's this added strategy element and really importance of cooking and stuff that manages to make these somewhat tedious systems feel really fun and rewarding. Same goes for a lot of things in the game, like even catching and taming a horse. You need to form a bond with that horse before it actually can completely follow your commands and obey you. The gameplay and open world are effective because that's the main event here, but so is the story. I think it does go just beyond a typical Zelda tale, and some voice acting here and there actually shakes things up pretty nicely. Most of the voice acting is fairly well done, at least from what you could expect voices would sound like in a Zelda game. But the real stories in the games are the ones you make for yourself in this surprisingly gorgeous looking open world. Yeah, okay, look, it's not super high res or detail oriented, it's running on technically outdated hardware, but like there's really good lush colors and contrast here, not to mention some awesomely well done sunrises and sunsets and just visual light design that just helps keep the game looking pretty good and not really pulling you out of the immersion. The frame rate can take a dip from time to time, most notably on TV mode on Switch, but it's not the biggest problem and it's not totally a disastrous one. It's really about the art design and style here, and I think Breath of the Wild has it in spades at least. Overall though, honestly, this is a damn good Zelda game through and through. You know, by following these modern game conventions, it actually, if you think about it, took a risk for Zelda fans, but thankfully it seems like it paid off. You're most likely going to be drawn to this game. It's hard to describe why it's so good, and I kind of only scratched the surface here, but I highly recommend it for fans of the series, if you can somehow get your hands on a console that plays it. But you guys know that's how Before You Buy works. I give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion. Honestly, I didn't have a lot of cons this time around, but now I want to hear yours down in the comments. If you've been watching a lot of video of Zelda, or if you did pick it up, I want to know what you think. Also, if you have a perspective from the Wii U, since I didn't get my hands on that version, please let me know what you think of that version. We want to hear from you guys down in the comments below. I'll be there answering as many questions as I can, but I'll also, as always, be on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Jake Baldino as well. You know the deal. Clicking the like button helps us out a ton, and we really appreciate it. The Nintendo Switch Before You Buy actually hit the top 11 trending on YouTube's front page, which is something really crazy and weird. But if you are new, subscribing is a good idea because we put out stuff like this all the time. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.